I'm going to call this meeting to order, and if you all would join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, as I said, welcome. Can everybody hear me okay? No. That's what I was afraid. Do I have, are these? Stephanie, do I have?
Mine's on. Take your cover off to see if the red light's on.
There you go. There we go. That's better. Right. A little bit better? No. Well, I will sit up really close. Hopefully that'll work. First item of business, well, normally the first item of business is going to be the approval of minutes, but Stephanie, I noticed if you would jot down, sometime we might want to move our clock back and get that done. Anyway, first order of business is approval of minutes, so I would like a motion to approve the minutes of the Town Council meeting of October 1, 2019. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any changes, comments?
I had one change for Petra, but I've given it to her privately.
She's got it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, approval of the minutes of the Town Council special call meeting of October 22nd, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any changes, comments?
None.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Mayor's update. I really don't have any items to update, but what I want to do is use this, I think, the same way I did at the last meeting, to just give you a sense of the flow of the meeting and how we are going to handle things. And I assume that everybody is here for the discussion on the short-term rental ordinance, which we have a full agenda today, so it's not the only item on the business. It's down on the agenda a little bit. How many of you here today were at the last meeting? Most everybody. Good. That way you've already got a sense of, the timing and how it works. So obviously the first item or the next item on the agenda is our citizens' comments. And so this is the opportunity, if any of you have comments that you would like to get up and address, not only the council, but your fellow property owners, this will be the opportunity to do that. We have a sign-up sheet, and I show we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people who have signed up to speak. And I absolutely want to make sure, because this is important, that everybody has an opportunity if they want to address the council. So I'm just going to call the names in order, and all you need to do is go up to the podium there. If you would, for the record, just tell everybody your name and address, that's all. And then you have the floor. Normally, we do limit people to 5 minutes. Normally, I have so few people here, I really don't pay attention to that, but because we do have a lot of people, I would appreciate if you try, if you can, to keep your comments to 3 to 5 minutes, but I don't want to stifle the conversation. So if we can, I'll start with Elizabeth St. John.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
I'm going to read some of my comments that you've already received from me, I guess, but maybe some.
Let's see if the,
Let me turn on the mic.
Good ideas.
Let me turn it on. All your microphones.
Okay, let's give it a try.
Try again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Can y'all hear me? Yes. All right, good, thanks. I've sent these comments to the council before, but for the benefit of the audience, I'll repeat what I said. I ask that we work with the sufficiency of the current rental ordinance, the 1 through 4 pages, the 4 pages that we have, and adapt the current procedures to take care of the roughly 13% rental pool on the island. 13% is not exactly an overwhelming number, And I think it's appropriate that we address it not becoming overwhelming, but I think we have good rules in place. What we don't have in place is an enforcement. We used to have little trucks that went around morning and night, picked up trash on the road, of which we have an awful lot these days, and dead animals, and also saw to it that the houses that had violations were ticketed or spoken to or whatever. We don't seem to have that at all. We don't seem to have in this document anything that talks to the prevention of the violation of the rules. We don't have anything in here that protects homeowners from having vacation places next door to them, rentals next door to them. So you can cap all you want to, but if you live in a $6 million house next to the beach club and the house next to you turns into a rental pool, hello, guess how much fun that is, and guess how much fun the beach club's going to have trying to keep those people out every single week that they're there. So, you know, we don't address those things. We don't address in this document educating our guests or educating our owners. I don't think too many owners are flagrant or intend to be flagrant violators. They simply are not accustomed to our culture. They're not accustomed to our island. They never lived on Hilton Head 30 years ago. You know, 30 years ago, Hilton Head was a wonderful place, and today you can't pay me to go there because it's been paved over and not carefully taken care of. So that is what we are trying to do, and I understand that, and I think it's a very good effort. But I think would accomplish more by doing preventive things. What this document has is punitive results. It punishes somebody for a violation. But let's step forward and educate our owners, educate our guests as they come through the gate. Give them the rules, the regulations, and tell them what's going on when you issue gate passes on the internet. I mean, that's one place to start. That's a small thing, but it's one place to start. So, you know, I really think that we're punishing too many people in order to try to get the few that are violating to conform. Let's not punish the multitude. Let's face what we're dealing with, the problems we're dealing with, and address those issues. And I think the town needs to step forward and take on not just an enforcement role, but a prevention role. And that's my point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Alan Allred?
Alan Allred.
Allred.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver and honorable members of the council. First of all, I want to thank you for addressing this issue of short-term rentals, and thank you for hopefully not being inveigled by talk of studies and let's study it more, let's study it more. Anyone that reads a paper and watches politicians, the best way to defer a hard decision, let's give it to a committee. Let's give it to another commission. You don't have enough information. You're not competent to make this decision. I suspect that's a subterfuge being used by those who don't want to see this pass. They don't want to see control. They don't want to see you address it. They want to see you kick it down the road. Please don't. And I laud you for having the courage to take the hit, even though you're not paid for this job. But between the social networking and all the rest, you've taken some abuse from all these great august minds and gossips and so forth. But you're trying to deal with a problem that is manifest, as one of your own colleagues brought forth on October 1st. Brought forth the evidence, brought forth pictures. We'd assume that he was biased, that he has some tendentious thing in mind that he's trying to achieve, which has been alluded to by the opponents. I've owned a condo on Turtle Point. I've lived with renters, and I own a home inside the second gate, and I have a renter on the block. And the truth of the matter is, people that say, well, just it's a matter of enforcement. Look, I'm all for a lot of police, but you got to deal with the cause of the crime, or you've got to deal with the cause of the problem. We have a problem, And having people drive up and down the streets and with flashlights, looking at the garbage cans, or seeing, oh, there's a fifth car, an SUV parked on the street, got to get it on the driveway, well, it won't fit. We got to deal with that. And I've lived among renters with the cigarette butts, the trash, the noise, many vehicles. And when people rent a home in my neighborhood, 5 blocks, I'm at 581 in Winboro, 5 bedrooms, turns into a big chill weekend. That's nice. I'm all for the family. But you've got the children, the grandchildren, and all the concomitant extras, cars and so forth, trash, noise, up to 1:30 in the morning at the pool. Is that what we are? At least I can only speak to inside, and I hate this sound, I don't like the idea of separating R2, R3. Well, they go ahead, they can rent. They can deal with that. R1, where I live, I don't want them there. And I support your ordinance. I actually think it's half-stepping. I would prohibit rentals inside. What are we? Are we a bunch of bed and breakfasts? Are we innkeepers? Or do we want a residential setting, whether we're here 4 times a year or whether we live here? So please don't be diverted. Don't be hoodwinked into being driven into the ditch. Stay on course. You're on the right track. I don't think it's enough, but it's a good start, and I applaud you for it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Kay, is it Ballinger? Yes, Kay.
Hi, I'm Kay Ballinger. I own 3 Eugenia, and it's been in our family since 1954, so we've seen a lot of changes. And I have rented for a long time, and I've never had a complaint. For many, many, many years, there have never been any complaints about any renters that I've had. And I had first seen that there was going to be a $1,500 fee, which threw me. Then I saw a $3,000 fee, which just about did me in. And now I see the $500. And I'm of the mind that the people who get the violations should be fined, as opposed to all of us who work really hard to educate our renters about the rules and regulations. I send a 11-page document to all of my renters. In addition to that, I include your colorful rules and regulations. I've taken a lot of things out of the big document y'all have, and I pass all of that along to them, and I think maybe that's why I haven't had any problems. But I did ask that that the town go a step further and produce a sheet that has everything that they could be in violation of, and a sheet that I could have, that I could send to my renters, that tells their name, my address and name, when they're there, and get them to sign it, just to know that I've got everything that y'all want covered with relation to them. And so I just, I know it behooves me to be sure that I always get my application in, and I should be okay as far as having the license in the future. But it's just very important for me to be sure that I protect myself, because if I got 3 violations from somebody and found out I couldn't rent, it would be, it would be a Holocaust for me, just about. I mean, it would be the end. So I just want to be sure that I have everything I need to protect myself from that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Jim Giroux? How you doing?
For you. I'm Jim Jurasik, 425 C. Lavender Court. I want to start by thanking those council members who have engaged in discussions with me about the proposed short-term rental ordinance over the past few weeks. I've appreciated your frankness and the intelligent discourse, even when we've disagreed. I'm in favor of the portions of the proposed ordinance that will modernize and strengthen short-term rental rules. In fact, I hope in the near future you will consider additional safety measures to reduce allowable occupancies to only 2 per bedroom, and to restrict the number of vehicles that will be granted guest passes at any one time for a rented residence. I look forward to seeing the details on a real enforcement plan to back up the ordinance. However, I object to the portion of the ordinance that proposes to use a license cap to control the number of future short-term rental properties. While I share the same concerns as others about the unstudied and uncertain impact this cap may have on residential values and the fact that it does nothing to address the problems at hand, my greater objection is that it represents a deliberate exploitation of Kiowa's unique government structure. By limiting the opportunity for a Kiowa property owner to obtain a license, even if it's in the future, the town is crossing a line that has never crossed before and was never intended to cross. Since the beginning of Kiowa's development in the 1970s, long before the town even existed, issues involving property rights and what we want our island to be have been addressed through KICA. The document that guides how decisions are to be made on such issues is the Declaration of Covenants and Restrictions. It's challenging to amend this document, and for good reason. Issues of importance, like restricting the rights of owners to rent their properties, should have the broad support of ownership before being implemented. Nonetheless, the council, with at least some portion of KICA's leadership looking the other way or perhaps even tacitly approving, has cleverly concluded it can pass this ordinance, help KICA circumvent the hard and dirty work of amending the declaration, and in the process obviate the need for either the town or KICA to justify its actions to the broader Kiowa ownership. To try to establish its authority for this action, council members have cited other municipalities where rental restrictions are being advanced. Yes, this is happening, but none of the cited examples even remotely compare to Kiowa's unique government structure with its combination of a robust and historically established short-term rental market, an 80% level of non-resident owners, and most importantly, a single umbrella HOA that represents the entire ownership, not just 20% of it as the town does. In virtually all other municipalities, it's the municipal government itself that's the big dog. Here it's KICA, not the town, with all due respect. I've heard many people on both sides of this issue express their frustration with KICA's inability to act on issues of importance. We are all seeing the increasingly clandestine backroom manner which it operates, especially when it comes to controversial issues. I share that frustration and urge everyone to work to change this by voting for KICA board candidates, the pledge to hold KICA's leadership accountable for this. Nonetheless, KICA's dysfunction should not be used as an excuse to undermine the credibility of our governmental structure, and that is exactly what will happen if the council approves this STR license cap today. I'm not a libertarian or a rabid property rights advocate, as some Kiowa posts have implied. I agree that the issue of managing and controlling the number and type of short-term rentals on Kiowa is absolutely one that should be studied by a credentialed expert, and if it's determined there is an issue and a way to address it in a manner that will reduce the probability of unintended consequences, and it's legally and properly ratified at a minimum by a vote of those affected owners, I would be comfortable that the issue has been properly vetted and would accept the result. I may well even support it. Currently, the STR license cap proposed by the council doesn't meet either of these standards. Allowing this cap, a de facto property rights restriction, to proceed unchallenged would set a terrible precedent. It would mean conceding that it's okay to allow a governing body that represents only a small minority of owners to impose its vision on the entire ownership community at will. It completely marginalizes the rights of non-resident owners. While the legal legitimacy of the STR license cap may well end up being determined by a court of law, without a process that allows at least the cap-affected stakeholders to have a direct say, it will never have democratic legitimacy. Please defer your vote on this ordinance, perform the study you now propose, including the study of the cap and alternatives within it, and if you decide to take action based on the results of the study, work with KICA to allow at least those owners that it will affect to vote on the initiative. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jim. Mary Ellen Perugini, did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Perugini.
All right.
So I'm Mary Ellen Perugini, and I live at 24 Retz Bluff Road, and my husband and I just moved to the island full-time a few months ago. I did write a letter to the council back in September, And I want to tell you, as somebody who's been very involved and reads all the emails, that it didn't feel that what I wrote was heard. And only since I entered the building today and asked an administrative person did I realize that the only way I could know if you received my letter was to proactively go to your website and look for the public comments, which I've just done on my phone, and I do see that my letter was there. So I trust that you guys have read that. I'd like to read some of the inputs of my letter, because there's something that affects my husband and I very, very direly, I would say, that I don't feel there's a lot of discussion about, because we're perhaps just a small number of people that would partially rent their house. What I said here is that we fell in love with Charleston after visiting the first time a few years ago, staying in a rented Airbnb room with a couple who shared coffee with us around their kitchen table and offered helpful guidance about the area. They have since become dear friends. On a return visit, we fell in love with Kiowa after walking along the beach. Throughout the process of designing and building on Kiowa, we wanted two things: to keep our home appropriately sized for our needs and to keep our building costs reasonable. We had difficulty achieving these goals. One item that worked against us is our neighborhood imposing not just one, but two house size minimums, one for minimum total square footage and another for minimum first floor square footage, which, by the way, is 60% of the total, not half, so it acts as a further size booster on the home size. When you architect a house, it's nearly impossible to hit one minimum on the head, so trying to meet two different minimums is that much more difficult. Bottom line is we found ourselves building a home that was larger than we required for just two people with occasional visitors. We also encountered shocking build costs on Kiowa. So along the path of building, we decided to arrange the house in such a way that we could help pay the mortgage by renting a room. We may do this in a similar manner to our friends, as we've only had great experiences over the years using Airbnb. We do not know when we will be ready to rent, and we do not believe we should be forced to apply for a rental license early, nor to maintain such a license in years we may elect not to rent. Such restrictions impose unnecessary and burdensome paperwork and cost. It really should be our choice year to year. We see in the proposed restrictions that renting a room in one's own house would be prohibited. Actually, this type of rental is the last thing that should be restricted if the goal is to achieve good renter behavior. When somebody rents, whether through Airbnb or elsewhere, they're aware whether they are renting the whole house or a room in the house. It's highly unlikely that a partying, non-rule following renter would opt for a space where the owners are living right next door or right there. Plus, the owner is right on hand to monitor where the renters park and to advise them personally of all the nuances and rules of Kiowa. It would not be unusual for such renters to fall in love with Kiowa and decide to come back, maybe even to move here, as we did. Hence, it is with great concern that we heard about these proposed restrictions right as our first mortgage payment was due. We are opposed to any rental caps and would like to see stronger code enforcement as the mechanism to ensure the rights of owners who feel negatively impacted by short-term renters. We do indeed believe owners have rights not to be kept up late by noisy or partying renters. Living close to a rental community, Indigo Park, we know when it's high rental season based on the noise that travels across the marsh and reaches our back deck. To date, this has not presented any concern, but it is something we note as relatively loud for the quiet place that we know normally as Kiowa. We understand there are established rules for things like where one is allowed to park and what one is allowed to keep on their property, decks, driveways, etc., and our stance is that all such rules should be enforced equally across renters, owners, guests, and visitors. We also believe that owners have the right to rent their properties just as we hope to do. It should be noted that during our build, we were subject to countless, and this was in capital letters, rules and regulations. In the case of the ARB, they were unwritten, arbitrary, and very expensive ones, all of which were steadfastly enforced. So we see no reason why rules to properly regulate short-term renter behavior cannot likewise be enforced. Where there is a will, there is a way. Please don't take away our right to rent, which might necessitate having to sell our dream house. It would be devastating if we could not stay in the home we built to spend the rest of our lives in because you restricted our ability to afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. And yes, we did receive, I recall the email, so we did.
Just so you know.
In fact, I thought I'd responded, but maybe not.
I didn't get any acknowledgement, and then I think I read your letter in which you acted like you had acknowledged it to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
So I actually called the town and I asked whether it was received, and I never received a call back. So again, I think there might be some better process to help people know when their voices are or are not getting through. And as I say, I just learned 10 minutes ago that
Yeah,
it is on the public.
But we had all read it. I was aware of it. Patrick Wilkie.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Wilkie. I live at 148 Brooms Edge. I'm in favor of the STR ordinance. I wish it would go further. I think for perspective, I think it's important to recognize that when Airbnb and VRBO and the other internet platforms came into existence, they changed the equilibrium that existed on Kiowa and all other places around the world. In fact, it's hard to find a place in the world where they're not currently or have not in the recent past come up with an STR ordinance. So this is not by any means a rigorous ordinance. Many ordinances, such as those in Austin, have restrictions such as no rentals within 1,000 feet of one another, and they're not alone. Further, with regard to the idea that we own property and thus we can do what we want with it, that's not Kiowa's way. We have regulations on everything from the color of our house to the fact that we do not have fences to when we can use the beach and when we can't. And the idea was that we recognize the externalities that exist. And it's not just private property. The way my property works, the way it looks, the way I use it, affects other people as well. And so there are regulations by KICA, by the ARB, and by the town. That's nothing new. We've had that the entire time. Now, with regard to the proposals, some people have come up with the artificial separation of enforcement versus the caps. They are not separable. Enforcement is important, but it's not enough. You cannot have perfect enforcement. First, I've had my golf club stolen. I've had someone park their car in my driveway in the middle of the night, only to find in the morning that they were there. If I'd had an emergency, I couldn't get out of my house and drive. I walk my dog and I have to pick up other people's excrement. And it's not, of course, the other owners, it's the renters. And you can pass out all the literature you want when somebody walks through or comes through the entrance, and they're not going to read it. So, but even if you had perfect enforcement, it doesn't solve the problem that's created by rental units. Essentially, during the high season, you have the constant move in and move out. And on your street, during the low season, the houses sit empty. And so you end up being a stranger on your own street because there's no one else there. And so we hear a lot of talk about there should be a study done. Well, here's the only question the study has to ask. If you're going to purchase a residence on Kiowa, would you rather purchase a residence that's surrounded by rental units, or would you prefer to purchase a residence that's surrounded by other residences? That's all the questions you have to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm reading this right. Frank John? Frank? Oh, Johnson, sorry. Sorry, Frank.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a neighbor. My property is adjoining to your property next door.
Oh, Frank, you're behind us.
Right next door, yes. And this is my first meeting, so excuse me if some mistakes are made. My question is that I'm between a rock and a hard place. I'm in the Charleston County attached to the Kiowa Island town of Kiowa. And there are a lot of questions I have. I'm not prepared to ask it now. The main thing I want to do is introduce myself, and hopefully when we talk, we can probably see some things alike. There are a lot of things like people want to use trailer, buy the property and build a mansion or whatever it is. But there are a lot of things, so that's why I'm here. And I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm learning a lot of things from listening to the people around. And thank you.
All right. And just for the right case, Frank's not, he's our neighbor here behind the, just back,
Yes.
in the back area there. We've talked, you and I have talked a number of times on the phone.
Right.
And so he was not speaking on the short-term rental issue, but different issues related
Right.
to us. Nice to finally meet you. We've talked on the phone, but, Wendy. I should have just looked at the 38 Marches Lane. Then I would have known.
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Lane. Two very quick things before I make my comment on short-term rentals. The first one is, I don't know how many people noticed it, but Bo Turner, who was the very first mayor of Kiowa, died last week. And I just think that it would be appropriate after the comments to have a moment of silence for Bo. I can remember after Hurricane Hugo, when he said, after we lost so many trees then, and Bo said, take a look at your neighbors, because you're going to be seeing a lot more of them for a while. So he certainly will be missed. Bo's been living at Bishop Gadsden for a number of years. Second is actually first a question, and then if my recollection is correct, a comment. When the town had the special call meeting, I think it was October 22nd, if I remember correctly, before council went into executive session, you mentioned that Joseph Wilson had been talking with town council on behalf of some of the vacation clubs. And then afterwards, the town went through the process of deciding to officially appoint him to negotiate on behalf of the town with the vacation
He was
clubs.
speaking to the vacation clubs on behalf of us.
Yes, and that's my point. I'm channeling Dennis McGill here. I don't remember at any point before that hearing council talk about reviewing any sort of a contract or written agreement for Mr. Wilson to do that. And if I miss that, please, just point me in the right direction.
No, I don't think you did.
I'm sorry?
I said I don't think you did.
Okay. In terms of the short-term rental issue, and I know I mentioned this at the Ways and Means Committee meeting, this ordinance, if passed the way it's written, does nothing to address property owners and their family and guests who violate the rules that you're seeking to protect Kiowa from. Years ago, we got a call we're on Marsh Edge, and Goldenrod backs up against it. And we got a call from one of our neighbors there about 10 o'clock at night, asking us to please turn down the noise because our guests were bothering them. And I suggested at the time that he might want to call security because the noise was coming down the river. Somebody mentioned how voices travel on the water. The noise was coming from the mansion. Buddy was having a party. We had already called security and complained. So this ordinance does absolutely nothing to address problems caused by property owners, their family members, and their guests. But the biggest concern I have is many people have asked for data that supports the need to change things now. I haven't seen any data. I would urge council not to pass this ordinance now. Collect relevant data, take a look at it, and then if in fact it's going to turn out the way you think it is, and you know, I know, Craig, you've had a very bad experience with the house next to you, but if in fact the data warrants it, then enact new legislation and pass a new ordinance. But until you have that data, I just don't see the purpose in doing this now. Thank you.
Wendy, I do want to, because you've spoken about 3 times and you've made the same comment about the house next door to me. And I just want to be very clear. Like most people, I have a rental next door to me, and it's pretty hard to find. Probably there are maybe others on the council.
We've got about half dozen on our street.
Yeah, so it's pretty hard not to have one. But there seems to be an implication there, and I just want to be clear that there has never been any instance that I'm aware of that I've ever called town code compliance about any issue with the rental next door to me. I've never had any contact with the owners, with the management company. So I've heard you say this now several times.
Well, because you've spoken many times about people who rent through these vacation rental companies.
So, but I just noticed you've mentioned that several times, and I figured that was on purpose. Sarah Whitford.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Whitford. I'd give you my address, but it wouldn't mean anything because I came in from Denver, Colorado. I represent Exclusive Resorts, one of the vacation clubs that we've been talking about, although not the one that used to operate next door to you. Exclusive Resorts owns 3 homes on Kiowa Island and leases another 5 homes. We've been here for more than 15 years, operating in the same way without issues. We're really familiar with this community and the culture that it has. In general, Exclusive Resorts remains opposed to this revised ordinance. To be clear, we do support requiring any provider of short-term accommodations to comply with all of the rules regarding those accommodations and the provision on the island. We also support the planned analysis on both the need for this ordinance and the impact of this ordinance. And I think those are 2 separate things that both need to be looked at. And we believe that the adoption of this ordinance before that research is completed is really putting the cart before the horse. Based on the public comment, moving forward with this in 60 days without looking into that is really, in our opinion, moving too fast. Specific to Exclusive Resorts, we continue to take issue with the targeted and disparate treatment that we receive under this ordinance. Like I said, for 15 years, we've been operating on Kiowa without issues. As a result of our operations here, we've brought more than a dozen home purchasers to this island, many of whom live here full-time. And we also bring an inordinate amount of revenue to local businesses through our members. There seems to have been some implication that we've been operating secretly and that we've been secretive about what we've been doing. And I just want to say that that's absolutely not true. Since the time we first started operating here in the early 2000s, we've had meetings and communications with the town. We've always been upfront about what it is that we do. We do believe that the town is overstepping here its authority and attempting to impose a tax on Exclusive Resorts that it is not authorized to do under state law. We have been working with the town in good faith to try and resolve our issues and our concerns about the substance and the process of this revised ordinance. We hope that we can find a way to resolve our issues with the town as opposed to having to resort to litigation. I did have one question based on our communications with Mr. Wilson. I just want to confirm that it is in fact the case that this ordinance, if adopted, won't be affected. Both the zoning ordinance as well as the STR ordinance won't be effective until January 1st, 2020. There's been some conflicting information about that, so I just wanted to confirm that that was the case.
That provision is.
Yeah, that provision is actually in the ordinance. If you go online and look at the ordinance.
Okay, because when we received the zoning, it showed it for the STR ordinance, but not for the zoning. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you. So again, you know, as a long-term owner in Kiowa Island, we really are open to working with the town on this and hope that we can find a resolution.
And I do want to make sure that we have our facts clear. And I will comment on this when we get to the change in the planning ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the case, and people will see that we've made a substantial change in both the short-term rental ordinance and in the planning ordinance in order to change the approach that we originally had in place as it affected exclusive resorts. And so that has been because our attorneys and your attorneys have been working back and forth, I think, over the last several months. And when you talk about disparate treatment, the disparate treatment is that we have given you a path to be treated like every other rental, to be able to operate on the island. But part of being able to operate is to pay accommodations taxes, which the hotel and every rental owner in here has to do. And am I still correct that it is your position that your firm is not in the business of offering accommodations and therefore is not subject to accommodations taxes?
The way our company is structured, we don't believe that we are subject to them. However, in consultation with Mr. Wilson, we have agreed on a structure moving forward. As of November 1st had been the agreement, a structure moving forward on November 1st to pay accommodations taxes. Yet, because of a disagreement regarding past taxes, the town is refusing to issue our licenses.
Because we kind of like the back past.
That is understood, and we certainly don't want to have to litigate that issue. And again, that is why we propose as of November 1 going forward, and that we continue through the appeals process to deal with any potential back taxes.
And I take your comments in the spirit they're intended, and we will talk about it more. But I just don't want to leave the impression that somehow we are not right now pretty actively engaged, your firm and our town attorneys, to try to figure it out.
I agree, and like I said, I hope that we can reach a resolution.
All right, thank you. Tula? We're almost to the end of the comments.
I was the last one that signed in.
No, you're not.
Oh, my God.
You're not. Okay. If you want the last word, I can let someone
No, I
else go first.
really don't. I don't want a long word either. Tula Di Giovanni, 51 Cotton Hall. So I loved everything I've heard. I really love what Elizabeth St. John said about educating our visitors and even ourselves. I really love that. I've also loved, I've listened to everything, I've read everything. I haven't been very vocal. My husband has been, but I haven't been. And I really can hear both sides of it. Totally understand that you want this to be your island. We all want this to be our home. We love our home. We don't want it to be disrupted. I'm not happy when I go to the supermarket and I can barely pass the cart past all those people that are there. But what we keep on forgetting is how much Charleston has grown, how much Kiowa has grown, how many more houses have been built, how many more people are here, not just part-time, but full-time as well. Our roads are narrow. You can barely pass one car and the other in fresh fields because they made it to look so quaint and pretty, and then you have these big SUVs that just can't get past each other. So there's a lot of issues that have happened, not because people are nastier, but because there are more people coming into our island. And I really, really love the idea that when you mentioned in your last email that you would be doing a study. I would love to see a study done, but I would love to see the study done first and then a vote taken. It would be, I think, the fair way to do it. And when we look, and I'd love to know, I think what has happened over the years, and looking at some old numbers, which are very hard to come by, the percentage of renters compared to the amount of houses that we have has not really increased. The percentages have remained flat. It's just that we have more houses. We do have more people visiting us. And we do promote tourism. We have a budget that promotes tourism. So as we promote tourism, we're going to have renters coming in to check out the island. That's how we first came. We bought something the first time we came, but we did come to just look at it. So these tourists are the people that buy the homes we put up for sale eventually, because eventually we'll all sell, some of us faster than others. So all I'm asking is that you do consider just tabling it for now, doing your study, and I think everyone will be happy to abide by whatever that study says. I certainly would be. But that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Tula. Two more people. Aniko?
Sorry, I was waiting that. Thank you for letting me speak. It won't be long. I believe enforcement is something that we should consider. However, I don't think it's enough. Oh, I'm sorry. Aniko Nicholas, 718 Glossy Ibis. I've been on both sides of the issue now. I bought a villa at Shipwatch back in 2005. We didn't rent it in the beginning, but then somebody told us, well, you could rent it because we didn't come down that often. So I rented it. It was a disaster. We had furniture that was stained. We had things stolen. Every time we came down, we had to buy silverware, glasses. My bedroom lamps were taken. It was just bedspreads were taken. I complained to my property management. They said, well, we're going to be on top of it. Unfortunately, they weren't on top of it. They couldn't get on top of it because if they rented, especially in the summertime, they didn't have the manpower to take care of it. We finally moved down here in 2013 full-time, finally sold the villa in 2014. Now I live on a street that has several rental houses. The first one, a few years ago, we had a bachelor party next door with 16 young guys that brought in a stripper at night. Now, how do you get 16 people into a 5-bedroom home, and how does the stripper get in? And how do all these people get in? I mean, I know there's security, but it's like, how did this happen? Call Kika, they came out, it stopped for a while, then the partying went on, and this went on for 4 days. Now we have another brand new rental on our street, and they have a pool as well. The kids party all day long, and then the adults party into the wee hours in the morning. You call security, they come out, then they just start all over again. 7 cars in the driveway with 2 cars in the garage. So that's 9 cars in one house, and that house is a 4-bedroom house. So, I mean, enforcement is something, but I think the code is something that has to be evaluated. They come around, they walk their dogs, they don't pick up after their dogs. I offer them the doggy bags. They look at me like I have things coming out of my head, like, what are you offering me? And I said, we have violations here. You're supposed to pick up after your dog. They come in my yard, they go in my yard. I mean, it's getting a little out of hand now, and I think it's something that we really need to take care of. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, Eileen Olenoff? I think you went last time, too.
Anyway, hello. My name is Eileen Olenoff. I'm on 7 Greensward. First of all, I want to acknowledge and applaud all of you, the hard work that goes into doing something like this. And people are talking about having studies, but I realize you guys didn't come to this decision overnight, that it takes a lot of work. And I just want to thank you for doing that, and I support it. When things are tough, people often say, especially on this island, well, it's too hard to do, it can't be fixed, so they leave things the way they are. I don't buy that, and I don't think a lot of people do. If it's hard, you try to fix it, and that's what we're trying to do. Enforcing it, like everyone says, is important. You've established some tools. I've read the document, not real closely all the time, but read it, and there are tools in there to start doing something, and I think that's important. I want to say many other residents agree with me. I'm full-time, and a lot of them are full-time. You don't hear them at these meetings much, or any of the meetings I go to. And there's probably a lot here today. They just don't speak up, so it's hard. And I think they need to realize, write a letter or do something if you can't come to the meeting, because I think you need to hear what's going on as much as, you can't just be one-sided. We all realize that the island is here for the resort, the visitors, and the residents. And I knew that coming in. We've been coming here for years like anyone else. But we need to work together, and I think that's what this is starting to do, because it seems like it's gotten out of hand. And that's what we need to do. There's absentee landlords, and that's part of the problem too, who don't, again, like we talked about, some people not adhering to taking care of the property. Even though the ordinance is not perfect, as people have said, and nothing ever is, I mean, anything government thing, nothing's perfect. You know, there's always things that you can change, but it's a start. And saying, well, we have to do more studies and we have to do more this, to me, that's when people say that, it's not just getting more information. It's like, let's do that because that's going to be another couple of years down the line, so we can get away with it for a few more years. That's what I see as that, and I'm sure you've done research in there. So I don't really buy that as an end-all. Like, let's table this for another 5 years. Well, in the meantime, people are going to come in and start gobbling up some more houses and land. So I think even though this isn't perfect, I think like anything, I say, what's the problem with doing it? Let's do it, see how it works, because obviously it's not working. You wouldn't have all these people coming in and complaining if everything was hunky-dory. So there's got to be a reason why it's not working, and we need to change, and that's what you all are trying to do, and I think that's important. And let's start doing that. Things don't work out, then there'll be meetings like this again in the future, and people will say, hey, that didn't work, but we have to do something, and I think that's what you're doing, and I'm real excited that you're doing that, because I think that's important.
Thank you. John, thank you. Thank you very much. So Eileen was the last speaker who signed up, but is there anyone else who has, while listening to everyone else, gotten the urge to go for it? Yep, I do need you to go up there.
Wade St. John, 14 Buffalo Head, Elizabeth's husband. I still think you can do all the caps and everything else, but if we don't enforce this thing, how do you enforce it? How can 16 people be put into a house? There's got to be a way to keep that from happening, okay? I mean, I've got people next door that rent, and they rent, you talk about every other day. It's amazing how much they turn that house over. But, you know, I had to call the gate the other night because they were out on the deck having a party. But we got to somehow enforce whatever we do. If we put the caps in, fine. But we've got to enforce the people that are coming to the island and renting. And I mean that, to me, that's the problem. And we mess around with these caps, then we're going to get a lot of property owners mad because they don't fall in the cap or whatever. But we still have to enforce it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, anyone else? Otherwise, we'll move on the agenda. All right, and again, I want to, both reference back to last month's meeting and to this one. I can't thank everybody enough for coming to a meeting like this. I know some of you are comfortable getting up and talking in front of everybody. I know for others it's probably not as comfortable, and I'm glad that you did that because we need to have people, come here. What happened, boys?
Just getting ready.
Okay. Getting ready for what? Anyway, it's important for people. It's important for us to hear, and so I do appreciate that. We do have a busy agenda, so unlike last month where this was really the only item, so we went almost straight from the citizens' comments to discussing this issue, our agendas always have a different intent. We always go to other business presentations first and so on, so there are some other business issues we will go through before we get to the actual discussion and second reading of this. So I'd like to move to the next item, which is a presentation. We have just completed our fiscal year 2019-2020 audit, and as part of that process every year, the council receives a short overview presentation on the audit. This has been reviewed with our audit committee. We are also hearing this year, council members, for the first time from our new firm, this was the first year of their engagement, Maudlin Jenkins, and I want to introduce David Irwin, who is a managing partner. And the floor is yours.
All right.
And I think this is what, about a 10-minute?
if that. Like I said, I know you all have a busy agenda, so I'll try to keep this short and sweet. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Irwin. I'm with Maudlin Jenkins. I was the partner who oversaw this year's audit of the town's financial statements, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this afternoon to discuss with you the results of this year's audit. I believe you all have received 2 documents, one of which is the financial statements themselves. The other smaller document, which we have on the screen, is something that we call our auditor's discussion analysis. This is an internal document that we prepare solely for your benefit. It gives you some general information on who we are as a firm. It summarizes what I'll be discussing with you all here this afternoon, and it also gives you a synopsis of some future accounting standards that will be implemented in the upcoming years. Now, the financial statements themselves are the responsibility of the town's management and members of the town council. As your auditor, our responsibility was to issue an opinion on these statements. Now, we conducted our audit in accordance with general accepted accounting principles and governmental accounting standards. And I'm happy to say that we're issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on this year's report. Now, this is what you want. What this means is that, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. In addition to the clean opinion, we do not have any audit findings to report to you all this year. And an audit finding, in its simplest term, is when we find a deficiency in internal control over financial reporting. In other words, proper internal controls were not in effect that would have either prevented a misstatement from occurring or it would have detected a misstatement in a timely manner. And without proper internal controls, the risk that you all have is there will be material misstatements in the financial statements, and the financial statements could be materially incorrect. So again, we had no audit findings to report to you all this year. So congratulations to you all on that. With all the new accounting standards that are being implemented throughout the year, each year, and it's really as complex as the financial reporting process has become, it makes it that more impressive that I can report to a council that we're issuing a clean opinion with no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Dorota, she had everything ready for us when we arrived, and the end result was a timely audit where we were able to go ahead and finalize the audit and get the financial statements finalized and presented to you in a timely manner. This is, as you've all stated, this is our first year auditing you all. As I'm sure you can imagine, there's sometimes a bit of a learning curve that comes with first-year audits. But I will say this is smooth and painless of a first-year audit as I've been a part of. So, again, just want to thank your staff for their hard work this year. Now for just a brief overview of the financial statements. You all prepare what is called a comprehensive annual financial report, otherwise known as a CAFR. A CAFR goes far, it includes additional information that goes far and above the basic financial reporting requirements. This document is submitted to the Government Finance Officer Association, otherwise known as the GFOA, where they put it through a pretty stringent review process, not only by their professional staff, but also by a special committee that looks at your report. And when they look at your report, it's not their objective to assess the financial health of the town, but more so to make sure that there's adequate information in your report so the readers of your financial statements can do so themselves. And the GFOA, I'm happy to say, has once again awarded the town the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. I believe this is the 13th year in a row that you all have been awarded the certificate. So again, congratulations to you all on that. This set of financial statements is a very impressive document that you all should be proud of. One section of the financial statements I do want to bring to your attention. It starts on page 4 of the financial statements. It's called the Management's Discussion Analysis, otherwise known as the MD&A. Your document's 120 pages long. I can certainly understand you not wanting to read this cover to cover. But if you do read one section, I strongly encourage you to read the MD&A. Again, this is written by management, does a really good job of summarizing the basic financial statements, as well as providing an analytical overview of the financial activities that occur throughout the year. So, in addition, there's quite a bit of comparative information in that section, meaning that financial activity for not only for fiscal year 19, but fiscal year 18 is also presented as well. And to me, that really adds a lot of value to the reader. It's easier to understand the good, the bad, the ugly of the current year activity when you have the prior year activity right beside to compare it to. So again, as you go through this document, if you would, please take the time to read through the MD&A. All right, the town's basic financial statements are broken up into three components. The first of which is the government-wide financial statements. Now, the government-wide statements, they provide a broad overview of the town's operations, similar to what you would see in a private sector business. All the town's funds are combined into one heading called, under a heading called governmental activities. Honestly, this is really the only time you will see the town's operations presented in this manner. You know, in the day-to-day operations of the town, you all are more focused on the individual funds. So while I did want to highlight this as a component of the financial statements, I won't go into that into any detail unless you all have any questions. The second component of the financial statements are the fund level statements. The fund level statements, this is what you typically see throughout the year. This component focuses on individual parts of the town's operations, and presents the town's operations in more detail than that of the government-wide statements. And when you talk about all the different funds that you all have, you know, of primary interest to you all is the general fund. The general fund is the main operating fund of the town. That's where the majority of the revenues are received and the funds expended. Page 7, which I have here on the screen, is a chart that shows the total revenues for the general fund for fiscal year 19. Total revenues were about $6.4 million. That's around $500,000 higher than you all had in the prior year. Two significant sources of revenues for you all, as you well know, are your permit revenue and your business licenses. Permit revenue totaled around $1.25 million, and your license revenue came in just over $2.5 million for the year. A couple other revenue sources worth mentioning. You all had around $850,000 in franchise fees and around $585,000 in local option sales taxes. The second chart, which is on page 8, shows the expenditures for the
David, if you could go back to that last chart, I just always like to point out that for everybody, there is no slice on there for a property tax.
Right.
And I realize that 90% of the people in the room know that, but we probably spend so much time reminding or explaining to people that Kiawah does not have a property tax, and that none of those taxes you pay to Charleston County every year are coming this way.
Yeah, your audit goes through, it sees several eyes in our firm, and every time the first question, where's the property tax revenue? Yeah. So that's a nice benefit for sure.
Sorry for that.
That's right. No, it's
like
worth mentioning. Absolutely. Page 8 shows the expenditures for the year of the general fund. It was around $5.2 million. That's right in line with last year. It was a slight increase, around $100,000. You know, once again, the majority of your expenditures are really for general government operations, to the tune of just a little over $4 million. The town also had public safety expenditures of a little over $500,000 and capital outlay of around $365,000. All in all, a really good year for your general fund. You know, this next chart kind of shows that. This next chart is a bar chart that shows over the past 4 years the inflows and outflows of money of the general fund. As you can see, fiscal year 19 and 18, you all have really done a good job of increasing your fund balance. As of June 30, 2019, the general fund had a fund balance of just under $10.5 million, and that's an increase around $2.4 million compared to prior year. And one thing I always like to remind people to keep in mind is fund balance. That's not what you all have in the form of cash to spend as you see fit. Fund balance is merely the difference between assets and liabilities. That being said, this is an impressive fund balance for an entity the size of you all. And to give you a little bit of perspective on that, the town's general fund incurs operating expenditures on average about $450,000 a month. Now, the Government Finance Officer Association, the GFOA that I talked about earlier, that's the organization that you present your CAFR to. They recommend that an entity maintains at a bare minimum between 3 to 5 months worth of general operating expenditures in your fund balance. You all have about 2 years worth. So again, you all are in a great position. Your general fund's in a great position, very strong financially, and this is a general fund that most towns would be envious of. Aside from the general fund, you know, you all do have 7 other funds. This includes your state, county, and local accommodations tax, your hospitality tax, your beverage permits tax, your victim assistance fund, as well as a capital projects fund. I won't go into those in detail, but I will say that they are all sound financially. When you combined all your funds together, the total fund balance of all these funds combined is around $21.2 million for the year. And that's an increase around $2.9 million compared to prior year. The third and final component of your financial statements are the footnotes. There really wasn't any change this year. You know, GASB kind of gave us a reprieve in the previous years. If you remember correctly, we had to implement GASB 75 and 68, which required you all to record your net pension liability and total OPEB liability in the books. They kind of gave us the year off this year, so your footnotes are not really changed compared to prior years. So unless anybody has any questions, I really won't go into detail on those. That concludes my presentation. You know, again, as you can see, there's quite a bit of information in this report. What I've tried to do is just hit the highlights, what I think is the most important to you all. That being said, if there's something that I didn't touch on that you would like for me to mention, or if there's something that you would like for me to expand on, I'll be happy to do so. But again, just appreciate the opportunity to be of service to you all. I want to thank your staff once again for their hard work this year, and we look forward to working in the future.
All right, David, thank you very much. Let me just ask the council members if anybody
I
has
have a question.
Yeah.
Why did we get a one-year reprieve on the pension issue, and what is expected in the coming years?
Well, it's not a reprieve. It's, you know, GASB issues new accounting standards every year. For the past 2 or 3 years, there have been newest standards, and the pension's one of them, and the OPEB, that have really changed your footnotes. It's changed the face of your financial statements. You know, you all had to put a net pension liability of a couple $1 million on the books 3 or 4 years ago. You all had to put an OPEB liability on the books last year. It wasn't nearly as much, but that's still a new liability hitting your books. What I was just saying was that there have been no new standards this year similar to those.
No new hits.
That's right. That would change your financial statements. The net pension liability, unfortunately, is still on your books, and it will be for the foreseeable future, as is the OPEB liability.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council questions? All right, and thank you very much. I also want to thank Dorota. Dorota, stand up. We got a crowd here. Nobody knows who our treasurer is. That was fast. Dorota and her team do a great job. And then Claus is the chair of our audit committee, and they have met and also gone through this entire process. The one comment I would make is that while at the time you did this, these reserves sounded very good. We've had a couple things since then, including $750,000 in Dorian expenses, which will come out of this.
Which is good that you have those reserves.
Yeah. And that is exactly right. I mean, I think, you know, the other side for us of not having a property tax is that the town's finances are all economy driven. So our money comes from business licenses and building permits. And so if business activity is high, the town is bringing in cash. But on the other side of that, if we move into any sort of prolonged recession, the town's finances start to get squeezed very fast. And we, over the last 5 or 6 years, have had now a practice of very large expenditures for storms. Matthew was about $600,000. This year was close to $750,000. And the next item we're going to talk about is a $2 million road project. So those dollars do look, they do look huge, and they are huge, but they also get eaten up very quickly. So anyway, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to move into the consent agenda, and we have 4 items on the consent agenda. These are all items which were recommended by the Ways and Means Committee for approval by Town Council. And normally, because they've already been recommended, we would approve them. But because we have a large number of people here, I want to just on each one make a comment just so you know what they are. The first one is to consider approval of the McCormick-Taylor Kiowa Island Parkway conceptual plan. As you may know, we are in the process of, over the next year, we will be doing a total repaving of the parkway, which I think everybody knows is not in good shape, from the roundabout all the way to the front gate. That will be primarily a resurfacing, but also a significant amount of reconstruction down by the Beachwalker intersection. there were three pieces to that project that we considered in addition. One was to actually use this opportunity to raise the elevation of some parts of the parkway. And I think everybody say, you know, essentially between Mingo Point and the real estate center, concerned that between issues of sea level rise and other issues that we might want to take this opportunity to raise the road and make sure that we added some height. We also looked at the question of adding curbs, because anybody that drives down the parkway sees that vehicles going off the edge are ripping it up consistently. And also just a lot of the landscape is getting damaged. And so we had looked at curbs. And we had a third issue, which was to go ahead and put in conjunction with Kiawah Island Resort, put in actual permanent turn lanes and an egress and ingress to the property they own right there by Freshfields. This item here is for the town council to go ahead and approve having our engineering firm go to the next step, which is to issue RFPs for the project. But the decision is that we will not be raising the road, because ultimately we did a significant amount of essentially scientific work on the road, trying to understand what sea level rise might bring us over the 15 to 20 year period of the road. We looked at elevations, we did a variety of modeling. The incremental price would have been about $1 million+, and we determined that that was not something that we needed to do as part of this project.
$9 million for the whole thing, not $9 million to raise the whole thing.
If we were going to, we also looked at an option of raising the whole road to deal with the potential of storms, and that would have been a $9 million cost. So we aren't going to raise the road at this point in time, but we are going to do some things to continue to develop real-time data and better understand what's happening to highest high sea levels. But we're comfortable with the functionality of that road out to the next 15 years. We also are not going to move forward with the curbing, because ultimately if you curb, we then have to put in drainage on that road because the curbs hold the water in. That was an additional $1 million. But we are going to be experimenting with a new approach that will allow us to put a fabric down that covers with sod in all of these areas today that are getting ripped up. So this recommendation is to move the project forward without those enhancements. The third piece is a question of whether the resort will be, in conjunction with this, putting in permanent ingress and egress. They will be holding off making that decision until we have the actual engineering costs in bids. The second item that you might be interested in was to consider approval of the contract with Outdoor Spatial Design for Kiawah Island Parkway. We have put out a bid and are now in the process of hiring a landscape architect. In conjunction with the repaving project, I think most people would agree that the landscaping there is not looking good. It's worn. This is the entrance to the community. With the recent storms, we found that we have a lot of vegetation there that just is not salt tolerant. It's not holding up to the environment. So we are hiring a consulting firm, a landscape architect, which will come back and provide the town with a design. And there was participation from the ARB, the town, I think Kika. Did the resort have anybody on that or not? No, sorry, Liz, you didn't. But the ARB was involved and a number of other people. And the intent is to get all of that done in conjunction with the repaving. And then the fourth item on here is a recommendation. We put out an RFP or a request for proposal a few months ago for candidates for a new town attorney. Our current attorney, Dwayne Green, who has served us excellently for about 3.5 years now, chose not to bid on that contract, and so we will be. We had a committee select a new attorney, and one of these items is the recommendation to approve Joseph Wilson, who's sitting in the second row here. as the town attorney effective the 1st of January. I normally would go through these, but since today I have a crowd, to let you know some of the things that are actually going on. So with that, I would ask, since this is the consent agreement, if I would have a motion for approval of consent items A, B, C, and D.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, now we will move to new business number A, which is the second and final reading of ordinance 2019-08, which is an ordinance repealing Article 15, General Offenses, Chapter 8, Short-Term Rental Permit and Regulations of the Kiowa Island Municipal Code by amending Article 14, General Regulations, and adding Chapter 5, Short-Term Rental Applications and Regulations. I do want to, before I ask for a normally the process, I will ask for a motion. If we have one, a second. Once we have that, we have a live recommendation that then we can ask for discussion. But before I do that, I do want to just highlight a few of the changes that are in this final version of the ordinance that have changed since the last version. And I think if you all will recall, this has evolved over the last couple months. The very first draft of the ordinance went out in late August, early September, prior to Dorian. Based on the feedback that we heard there, a number of changes were made prior to the first reading, and we've made only a few changes based on the feedback that we've gotten since. 4 changes. The revised ordinance does provide for interfamily transfers of property, or I should say interfamily transfers of property can include the transfer of an STR license and a transfer of a provisional lot license. Point being simply that in the situation where within your family you are simply transferring or deeding your property from parents to kids or uncle to whatever, but if it's inside the family, in that situation, we are in the ordinance allowing the license, if the licenses are up to the caps, we're allowing the license to stay with the property. I don't think it happens a lot, but it was it was an issue that came up in a few places. We listened to it. We thought it made important sense. And so that change has been made to the draft. The second one, which addresses one of the people who spoke, is that destination clubs and private vacation clubs are not permitted by the town's zones R1, R2, and R3 unless the destination club complies with the requirements listed in section 15805C. Ultimately, what that means is that if you recall in the earlier versions, we were doing 2 things. We were taking a certain type of vacation destination club, of which right now on this island, Exclusive Resorts is the only one that fits in that category. I think Inspirato is creating a new model that may fit in that category. There was a change being recommended that would point forward, make those non-conforming uses, and there was a provision which would allow those entities to retain their current units that they already owned, but that they would not be able to add any new ones. And the intent there was because they were a different model. We did not, by other parts of our code, intend to allow commercial entities operating. We didn't allow clubs and whatever. And so we were dealing specifically with that sort of entity. We have been dealing with, through negotiations and discussions with those entities, to find a path so that we could still protect our planning code and ensure that commercial businesses and clubs and all of the new kinds of things that seem to get created are initially, by definition, not accepted uses, but where we had a destination club, a vacation club that was essentially operating as a short-term rental, to not discriminate against them, but to allow them to continue to operate. And for example, between I believe Inspirato and Exclusive Resorts, I think they have about 20 properties on the island right now. So what we have is a change where we are now going to allow them to be a permitted use. They actually are a condition, well, they would be a conditional, they'd be a conditional use. And the condition is that in order for them to operate, they have to operate under the short-term rental rules. So it means they have to have a business license. They have to abide by the limits on occupancy. They have to abide by the limits on parking. They have to, their renters and their advertisements have to be treated as if they are a renter. They have, before that, had issues because they would argue that they are not providing rentals. They own a home, and they're 4,000. I don't know if the person's here, she may disagree with me, left, but they would argue that their 4,000 members are simply guests of their property owner. And so what we're trying to do is essentially say, look, you've been here for years. We want to try to help you operate, but you got to operate like a rental. There is a significant bone of contention. They are resisting paying accommodation taxes, which every other rental has to pay. And so under the changes here, they can continue to exist, but they will have to act like any other rental. Hope that made sense. The third thing was we had in here a new provision in the second reading that if a property had was found guilty by a judge of 3 violations, that they were subject to revocation of their license for 12 months. And there was a loophole in there because the way it was written, it said by the judge, but some people just simply come and say, fine, I'm guilty, let me write my check. And so that language has been changed to say if a short-term rental owner receives 3 violations, found guilty by admission or by a municipal judge, then their license is subject. So we've just eliminated a loophole, which I don't think is going to actually occur very often. And then finally, I think the issue that we heard, setting the caps aside, the issue that we probably heard the most number of comments about before and after the first reading was the fee that was being recommended for an application fee. I believe in the first draft there was a $1,500 fee for R1 properties. At that meeting, that hit resistance. The staff was asked to go back. The staff was given some basic guidelines to say that the purpose of that fee is only for administration enforcement of short-term rentals. It is not intended to be a general revenue source for the town, and that to create the fee, what we need to be doing is only covering our costs. And so that fee, the recommended fee, was reduced from $1,500 to $500. And the fee for the non-R1s stayed at the $200. So those are the 4 changes. Everything else in the ordinance is as was recommended at the first reading. So with that, I am going to ask for a motion to approve.
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. At this point, I will ask whether any of the council members have any discussion, questions, comments?
I've had my say. I'm good.
Anyone? I'm not forcing you to, so no.
Oh, I just want to say that I fully support this. Kiowa Island's a private community. It was developed to balance the residential community with the business development of the island. The town's mission is to protect and preserve residential character of the community and the island's unique natural environment, while supporting the economic vitality of the resort and other commercial enterprises I've been coming here for 34 years, and I've been full-time since 2015. The reason I bought here was because of the master plan's emphasis on preserving our environment. And I think that the direction for the town can be a way that satisfies all of our needs. I know there's pros and cons, but I take the pro on this.
I'd like to make a comment. I think this is a difficult issue. I think all of us who are your elected representatives at this point have to keep one thing in mind. That is, are we doing our best to represent the long-term interests of all the residents and property owners on this island, including our big stakeholders, people like the resort? I think in doing that, we have to sometimes balance out what I call conflicting short-term interests. Perspectives are different based on what's going on in people's lives and what's going on right around them, whether they have a rental next to them or don't have a rental next to them. And I think the members that I've worked with on this council have done an outstanding job in trying to balance all that out and figure out a solution that begins the process. And as one of our speakers, the last speaker, said today, this is the beginning. We're going to have a lot more work to do over the next decade if you expect to have this island be successful and prosper. Thank you.
And I think I want to, again, maybe second just a couple of those points, and then we'll move on. Obviously, I don't know how many of you read the communication that I put out on Thursday, which tried to address, I think, a number of issues. And I hope if you did read it, if anything came across, I hope it is at least a recognition that we realize that this has been a difficult issue. We realize that we are a very diverse community. We realize that people have very different opinions. I don't for a minute sit up here and think that the view that I may have is shared by everybody in this room, but I do know that it's shared by many. I'm convinced that what we're doing here is something that is in the long-term best interest of Kiowa. But I'm not infallible, and time is going to tell whether we are right or whether we're wrong. And we do absolutely recognize that there are very divergent opinions. I said in that same communication that if we simply passed this ordinance and then said, okay, we're done, let's move on to the next issue, that would be a mistake, because this island is going to evolve. The property owners here are going to change. People's views and reasons for living here are going to change. The real estate market's going to change. And so in no way can we treat this as just sort of okay, we're done and let's move on. We have to do things to make sure that we understand whether this is the right way to try to deal with the issues that we're trying to deal with. And if we're wrong, then either this town council or future town councils are going to have to step up and admit that something needs to be modified or changed, or our property owners and citizens are going to have to tell them that they need to do that. But I don't for a minute think that we may not in the future learn different things that might cause us to look at this different. There is no desire. One of the strongest goals of the town has been to ensure and preserve the Kiowa brand and preserve property prices and property values. And if we thought for 1 minute that this was having that effect, I can assure you we wouldn't be approving it. And I also recognize that we shared very different views on that. So I do hope in a minute I am going to make a recommendation. There has been a lot of discussion about study, and let's do a study, let's wait and study, and I am going to recommend something in a second if this is adopted, and hopefully at that point maybe I can provide some additional perspective.
I did have just two quick points. One, I'll stick with one. It's been said quite often, and I've got a pretty thick skin, and I go strictly with the, sticks and stones, break my bones. But the one thing that really bothered me, and that I just want to be very clear about, is we're all doing this here. No one's doing this in order to jump to the next office and the next office and the next office. The pay isn't very good. This is community service. I, for one, but I know the four others would agree with that, but I, for one, wouldn't have agreed to stand for city council in a million years if I thought that that meant I was beholden to the 20% or X number of percent of people who get to vote, which is residents. Not in a million years. So it really bothered me when I heard quite often, you guys don't represent the island. We are here because we represent every owner on the island. We have Kika and we have all those Ks. They're different roles. And I think everyone, all those entities represent the island. We sure as heck do. No one here, does anyone really think we're making decisions so that the voting full-time residents re-elect us? That's what I heard sometimes, and I was thinking, that doesn't make any sense. We have some really, I think, well thought out, certainly based on hard work, thoughts about where the long-term future of this island goes. The island means everyone. And that's our best foot that we're putting forward here. This has nothing to do with representing residents, but not non-residents. And anyone who thinks that should think again. Happy to discuss it. It's just wrong.
All right, I have a motion, I have a second. If there is no more discussion, Petra, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on this one.
In alphabetical order. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Councilmember Prickett?
Yes.
Councilmember Said?
Yes.
Mayor Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead?
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance is approved. Let's move now to the second item B of old business. This is to consider approval of ordinance 2019-7, an ordinance to amend Chapter 12 Land Use Planning and Zoning of the Town of Kiawah Island by amending Article 2, Division 3, Section 12-1.02. And again, this is a second and final reading. And I think in my earlier comments, I've again described the change here. The significant change was that in the version that was read and passed at first reading, the intent would have made a destination and private vacation clubs a non-conforming use. And for the reasons that I've described, which is the work that we've done with the couple firms, it changes the scope of this to make those clubs a conditional use, tying the conditional use back to their ability to act as a rental organization. So what that means is that if somebody like Inspirato or Exclusive Resorts is wanting to do business and they follow the rental policy, they'll be able to do business. If somebody wants to buy up 3 properties, I'm making this up, to be the, to have the Kiawah Island some sort of club or something like that, that is again, it's not a permitted use. It's a commercial operation and would not be allowed. So we're essentially allowing a path here for these firms that have essentially been doing operations. So with that, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, conversation?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Let's move to new business. We have 3 items, and the first one is to consider authorizing the Mayor Pro Tem and Town Administrator to initiate a study of the property value and public policy implications of Kiawah's brand positioning, to include study scope initial screening of consulting firms' costs and approaches for inclusion to key stakeholder groups. I want to give some background as to what we're, because that's a real mouthful of consulting words, of what we're trying to do here. You know, in the discussions of the last few weeks about the short-term rental ordinance, you know, I heard obviously a lot of, got some people leaving, which I understand, but look, we've heard a lot of good discussion, a lot of good arguments. But I also heard a lot of people talking past each other, not intentionally, but because they were coming at this issue with very different views and I think very different understandings about what's going on today in Kiowa's property real estate market. I commented in the communication that I provided last week that one of the things that the discussion on short-term rentals really highlighted is that already before that discussion started, there has been for some time, I think, a lot of concern, a little bit of angst among a lot of property owners about the current state of the Kiowa real estate market, of property values. I know for a fact myself, over the last year, I sat in one meeting where the discussion was about whether the core problem was some people were on MLS and some people weren't on MLS. I've sat in other meetings where the discussion was property values are being hurt because the developers put too much property on the island at one time. Clearly, I don't think it takes long on the island right now to get the sense that regardless of short-term rentals, there has been some concern and real concern for some period of time about Kiowa's property values. Are they stagnant? Are they not stagnant? Are we competing well with other entities? And that's clearly been in the background. And I think that the debate of the last few weeks has really highlighted that sort of underlying concern. The other thing that I saw, you know, I've talked a lot in the last few years about Kiowa having a distinctive brand. And that preserving that brand was important to preserving the character of the island and driving property values. And one of the things that I think I saw in many of the comments and many of the emails that I received is that a lot of reasonable questions were raised about what that brand really is. I saw a lot of emails and a lot of comments that talked about, well, is Kiowa a resort community? Is it a residential community? Is it a residential and resort? What does it really mean to be either or both? I heard a lot more debate and discussion and difference of opinion about what Kiowa really is than I think what I've heard in the past. And I also heard in the emails, if you see the many that I got, really very little consensus about the brand. In some of the comments I heard about the Kiowa brand, that, you know, however you want to define the brand, I heard from some people that the brand needed to be preserved. I heard from other people that the brand, as we currently know it, cannot be sustained. It can't be preserved, that it needs to change because the real estate market and buyer trends are changing. So I had people on the one hand arguing that, you know, CAPS makes sense because we have a brand, they will help us sustain it. I've got emails from other people saying, you know, well, that brand's no good, you can't sustain that brand. We're going to have to think differently. I heard comments that Kiowa needed to preserve some residential character of the island, and I heard comments from many people that Kiowa should be thought of merely as an economic proposition, and that the primary obligation is to allow property owners to essentially maximize their cash flow as best they can. And I'm not suggesting one of those is right and one of those is wrong. My point is simply to say that over about 2 months of debate, what I heard was a huge, huge amount of disparate views about what Kiowa is, where it's heading, what our real estate market is telling us about where it's heading. And as a consequence, very hard to come together around issues like short-term rentals or CAPS or anything else. I also heard a lot of different views about how the community ought to decide what our brand is. And some people pointed to residents and said, well, residents, the people who live here ought to be driving what kind of island this is. Some people said, no, it's not just residents, but residents and property owners ought to do it. I heard others argue none of those people should have any say. It should totally be the real estate market. It will drive Kiowa, and wherever the real estate market drives us, that's what we should become. And lastly, I did talk with a lot of realtors, and I heard all kinds of different views about what the environment was. And I had realtors who told me things are picking up, we're having our best sales ever, inventories are going down. And I'll turn around and have a different realtor who's telling me we're in the worst property market, real estate recession that I've ever seen on the island. So this whole debate has been taking place in an environment where there are all kinds of different views, and very few of them commonly held. What I'm proposing and what I want to propose to the town council, because the town has always said that one of our primary goals should be to be concerned about property values. And if we can better understand and help what are driving property values and how we can strengthen those property values, we ought to step up and try to do that. We've also heard a lot of pleas for studies, and I know some frustration that we haven't done that. But part of the issue in those pleas is we get the question, well, but study what? I mean, we have talked to realtors about the issue of caps, about property values, and in no instance do we have lots of realtors who sincerely have beliefs, but we don't have any, or very many, who have any kind of data. So what I'm proposing is, and what I want to propose to the town council, is that we engage an independent firm that will in fact provide an independent analysis of Kiowa's property values and market and brand, with the intent of better understanding our current experience. Let's really find out what's going on today. What's the data really telling us? What is the strength of the market? Are property values stagnant? Are they not? How do we compare to our competitors? Better understand market trends and property owner trends that might influence the property market. Some people are saying, for example, and I've had some realtors tell us this, that the days when somebody could afford a $3 million property as a second home is gone. Tax laws have changed, buyer preferences have changed. If that was the nature of the community, that's going to have to change. So let's try to better understand what the market is looking like, where our buyers are coming from, and ultimately let's try to evaluate actions that the community can take, whether that be property owners, the town, the major entities, the community association, the resort, the developer, the real estate companies. What are things which we can actually identify and do that would help us both and better understand what's going on in the property in our property values, and better understand what kinds of things we can do. Is it rentals? Are we not reinvesting like we should in the community or in properties? Or what are the issues? While I'm recommending that the town fund and fully fund the study without any financial participation from any other entity, for this study to be productive and to ensure its credibility, I would want and ask support for involvement from a cross-section of the community, which would include the community association, the major developers, at least 2 or more of our real estate firms, and some mix of full-time and non-full-time property owners. I'm not recommending a working committee. I'm recommending a independent consultant, but surrounding that consultant with some sort of an advisory committee that can help ensure access to information, credibility, that they've got the right scope. I have a general agreement. I believe I am comfortable right now that the Kiowa Partners and the Kiowa Island Real Estate will be happy to support and participate. I'm comfortable that Kiowa Island Resort will participate. I'm looking back at Jimmy and Kathy and Dave, but I'm pretty comfortable that the Community Association will participate. So, and no issue will be off limits. So while the focus of the study is not specifically on short-term rentals, it's not specifically on caps, it is on a much broader set of issues, no issue is off limits. And so you can read between the lines, there's no way you're going to do the study and not in some way the question get assessed, oh, where do short-term rentals fit into all this? And if out of this, nothing's off limits, if out of this, we learn something different about short-term rentals, we learn something different about caps, then obviously those cannot be ignored. What I would like to do is have the council's authorization to move forward. The first step would be to authorize our council member Chris Waddick and Stephanie, our town administrator, to take the initial step of coming back to the council in December with a specific recommendation. That recommendation would include the scope of the study, an initial screening of firms, not going through a full process at this point of selecting, but narrowing down the consultant, giving us at least a sense of cost, and this will not be inexpensive, and also what the approach would be for the inclusion of the kinds of key groups that I've described. The intent would be to run this on a timeline so that the results would be, and consultant report would be done well before the middle of the year, so that both this town council, our property owners, the community association, the realtors, everybody would have all of the results of that study before mid-year. This council would have the ability, if there's anything they learn in that study that would cause them to think differently about any policy that we have, they have ample opportunity to do that. And whatever council succeeds this one would have that opportunity. So that's what I would propose. I am comfortable that we will get involvement and support, especially from some parts of the real estate community, which I think is critical for us to have. So what I'd like to do with that is first open to any questions, but what I'd like to do so that we are taking a specific action is to take a vote authorizing us to go to that next step.
I'd like to move this recommendation.
All right, so a second? Any comments, questions?
No.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item we have is to consider approval of the 2019-2020 Kiowa Conservancy funding project. We have two very large projects that the Conservancy has asked us to consider funding. And Jim, who's doing this? Jim Jordan?
Yes.
I'm still here.
Yes, thanks everybody for staying. This is nice.
Yeah, okay, so I'll be pretty quick. I know you guys all know that, the town has given financial support to the Conservancy for a number of years. Last year it was a $70,000 line item out of county aid tax, and it supported 5 different Conservancy projects. This year, once again, we've got that same line item in the budget. It's again $70,000. And so the way the process works is the Conservancy comes up with a list of projects. They present that to the Environmental Committee. Then the Environmental Committee makes a recommendation to Town Council. This year was a little bit different in that the town, prior to the Conservancy submitting their projects, basically gave them a list of topics that we wanted them to address. So I think what we ended up with was some really good projects. I think all 3 are good. But with the $70,000 that we have in that line item, the Environmental Committee's recommendation was to provide funding for the first 2 studies. So the first one would be the groundwater table research and monitoring study, and that has an estimated cost of $50,000. The second one is the marsh vulnerability study, has an estimated cost of $19,000. And then the third one, which the committee was fine with was for a native plant symposium at a cost of $18,000. But so the committee's final recommendation was to support the first two, stay within the $70,000 budgeted amount, and then if there was money left over, potentially to revisit the third project. And so if there are specific questions on the projects themselves, we've got several folks from the Conservancy here who can answer any technical questions about the projects or how it's going to work. But that is what the Environmental Committee recommended.
Jim, can you give just a 30-second explanation why the water lens is so important?
Sure. Yeah. So the first project that's going to look at the groundwater table, right? So that's the layer of fresh water that is throughout Kiowa Island, right? Kiowa Island is basically floating on fresh water. It's called the freshwater lens. That's how plants and trees can grow. If it was salt water, then plants and trees couldn't grow here. But so underneath that freshwater lens is a layer of salt water. And so as the sea levels rise, that salt water level comes up as well. And ultimately, potentially, it could displace the freshwater lens, which would then make Kiowa a pretty tough place to grow anything. And so the idea with this project is to basically figure out, where that freshwater lens is, and then monitor it over time for changes.
If I can, this was, out of the sea level rise study, this was one of the, I thought more important but often overlooked issues because, the compelling case was made that so much of the forestation that we have is not particularly salt tolerant. Right. And if you get that lens moving up, not very much, that all of a sudden and you see some of that in the marshes already, or near the marshes, that right. We were going to see potentially a significant die-off of vegetation. So I think this is a worthwhile project, and we don't have an obvious other entity that could grab this and run with it.
Yeah, I got to, Lee's back there. I got to give credit to the Environmental Committee and the Conservancy. In the 3 years I've been here, this is the best well thought out and presented projects that we funded yet. So congratulations.
I agree. All right, that's all I have.
Any other?
This is not a voting issue since the money's already been allocated. Is that correct? You do want to vote on the projects? Okay.
All right.
And I would move to approve the two projects that Jim's laid out. The third, in case the first two come in under budget, I think would be the way you'd want it.
Sure. Second?
Yep.
Second.
The only other thing I would, ask is in both of these studies, maybe you can answer it. They are highly dependent right now on the work you're doing to get professors and support students at College of Charleston who are really driving these. And I don't know where you stand in that, but I guess what I would want to do is make sure that our funding is contingent on you satisfactorily getting those arrangements set up.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
All right, everybody. I'm a land preservation coordinator with the Kiowa Conservancy. My name is Lee Bundrick. And yes, we've been talking to several professors at the College of Charleston for this. Specifically for the groundwater study, we're working with Tim Callahan. And he said he is not teaching a class now, but he has a class set up for me to go and talk to them to recruit a graduate student to work on this study. And we'll fund them throughout the year to work on this, and will be able to use his expertise on the project. So he'll have a PhD professor on the project as well as a graduate candidate. For the other project, which is the marsh vulnerability study, we're getting Dr. Norm Levine, and he is with the Low Country Hazard Center. What he'll be doing is providing a lot of GIS services with us. So we'll have some money funded over at the Low Country Hazards Lab, who will be able to work with these data and provide it to the town afterwards, as well as Kika and other entities on the island. And through both of these projects, we're both using their expertise, so we're making sure that these projects are very detailed and very down pat and provide us with the information necessary. So But yeah, both of these I'm going to work on recruitment for, and I'm going to start on this probably sometime in November later on. So,
and I think all I'd like to see is maybe, Jim, that once the project's ready to go, maybe they do a review with the environmental committee so they're comfortable that what the Conservancy's ready to do is what was described, and then the check can get written.
Yeah, and absolutely that'll happen. The other thing is that Lee is in the process. We're setting up basically an advisory committee to basically work on the study design, approve the study design before any of this would go forward. And that group is going to have representatives from the town, the Conservancy, KICA, as well as property owners. So there'll be John Leffler will be on that committee. So we'll have some really good folks looking at the project design before we would actually approve it or give the Conservancy any money.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
All right. Okay. The last item on the agenda, but certainly not the last item, is an alligator study. And Mariana, you're gonna be doing that?
I am going to be doing that, and I have to say, Mayor, when I was in college getting my degree in nutrition and then going on for my MBA, I never thought I would be talking about alligators. So they're so important to our environment, so it was a pleasure to work on this. We actually had a work group that got together for about 3 past months. It included Ben Cheatham from Kika, Liz King from the resort, and myself. And we also had resources available to us, such as like Jim Jordan, Matt Hill, our town biologist, Tom Rainwater, who is a research scientist from Clemson. And actually, Clemson has been involved in a 35-year alligator study, including alligator growth and reproduction population management. These are our experts, as well as Liz King is a naturalist, and she's extremely knowledgeable and made several contributions to this study. The purpose of the study is to ensure that we protect our public, protect our wildlife, eliminate any legal liability exposure, and retain our alligators as an important element of the Kiowa experience. In order to do this, we reviewed and evaluated property owner and visitor awareness of alligator presence, talking about on-site signage and communications. We also looked at intervention protocols, resources that included record keeping. We evaluated the training adequacy of our island resources, and we talked about population control. For public and property owner communications, we talked about training. In particular, we were looking at Matt is going to actually produce a video to assist us with the security gate training, because they have a great turnover. It's hard to make sure every quarter we do this training on alligator safety. So they will have a video that they'll be able to use and then sign off on once they've seen the video. We're also talking about golf operations having some involvement, and with the dock at the Endell Inn, there's definitely a need for additional signage and careful surveying of use. For signage, we're going to add additional danger signs wherever necessary. We're trying to use visuals when we can, because while the signs are printed, that's great if you're from the United States and you speak English, but we do have a lot of other than English-speaking people visiting, coming to the resort and staying here, so we'd like to accommodate their needs as well. And in addition, we want to make sure that any signage we use is something that a child could look at and then, no, don't feed the alligators, it's a problem. We're looking at the areas around Night Heron, the river course, any paths that are heavily traveled where there are no signs, and any place where alligators bask that are near the bike paths. That's another situation we run into periodically, where the bike paths are very close to the water and the alligators are basking on the land there. We want to add an alligator awareness statement on the back of the visitor passes that are received when somebody comes into Kiowa. And we're thinking of adding a statement of responsibility for homeowners to let the renters know about alligator safety. We're going to educate property owners about alligators through town publications. We already do that, and we just want to make sure we're doing it frequently enough. And post any information online. And there, getting back to the language issue, we are talking about having some information translated, just statements about alligators, into different languages. The record keeping that's done by the town, the resort, and Kika is very important. We want to make sure that's up to date. I mentioned security members, educating them, and the deputies that are on, the deputies that we have now. We have 4 people on 24/7, and they should learn about the protocol for handling alligators and record keeping, and continue the nature center programs on alligators that are very, very successful. We want to make sure we separate alligators from people and avoid encounters. Again, I mentioned the heavily traveled paths for prevention signage and barriers. We want to also look at the use of island ramps, platforms, with the goal of increasing the distance for humans and alligators. What I mean there is, in some of our lakes, we may have like a platform or a little island in the center of our lake where alligators can bask, and that would keep them off the land around the lake if appropriate. We also want to test different styles and sizes of platforms to determine the alligator preference. We'll be handing out a survey to them. Learn to look into man-made basking areas, and there's already some existing around night heron. And we're talking about installing fencing and vegetation a distance from the lake to allow gators to continue to bask on the lake edge, but be away from visitors. Most of you probably have been to Osprey, and if you sit and eat at the restaurant out on the balcony, you can see there's a great number of alligators in that area, and you often see people leaving their dinner to go down, take the children down to look at the alligators, so that's not necessarily a safe way to present that. And one last thing we talked about is alligator population control. According to the professionals, alligators self-regulate their population. Of course, all nuisance alligators should be removed immediately and disposed of. Our population of alligators has been consistent for years. There have been many questions about removing larger alligators. We're asked that frequently, but in reality, a large alligator can be 50 or 60 years old, and they provide a sense of order among the population. So removing the larger alligators would upset the balance of the rest of the population, and it could be more disruptive than realized. And that would be it. I'd like to thank everyone that contributed to this. I found it very interesting, actually. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Well, and I want to thank you and Liz and Ben for doing this, as well as Jim and everybody else. That just as background, what caused this? You all may remember that 2016, I think, Walt Disney World had the event, the very tragic event there, where a young child was killed, and at that point, a number of communities like ours, including Kiowa, at that point got together to really look at their protocols, did a lot of things to improve signage, to improve their processes for dealing with aggressive alligators. And after we had a incident and a near a near, well, it was a tragedy, turned out not necessarily to be alligator caused, but with one of our residents during the summer, it caused us to say, hey, we need to step back and maybe take another look at alligators and make sure we're comfortable that all of the things that we're doing are appropriate, our signage, our protocols for dealing with them. And so that was what they were asked to take a look at. I just wanted, the one thing I have been asked the most about, and I'm reading your recommendation, was there's more and more desire to see alligators culled. And what I'm hearing here is that you all have pretty unanimously agreed that that is not a requirement and something that you recommend.
That's right, and as I said, it can cause more upset to the environment than is worth it. And we heard that from our own wildlife biologist as well as from Tom Rainwater out of Clemson.
Okay. Any questions? All right, thanks. All right, we're almost complete. We'll go to Town Administrator's report.
Yes, I just want to give just couple quick updates. One is with regards to Dorian, which you've already touched on, Mayor. But just to reiterate, right now the town has expensed out about $568,000. We still have some remaining bills yet to come in or to pay. So we'll probably look at, when it's all said and done, about $750,000. Brian, who's over the public works here for the town, we have our conference call in with FEMA tomorrow. This is to kick off our reimbursement request. But again, that is only for the public portion. So out of that $750,000, we may get back about 10%. Because we can only submit for the public portion of our request. So majority of our expense, of course 90% or so, was behind the gate, which is not eligible for reimbursement.
And we do not, and we will not be doing any special assessments or fees or any charges to.
We will not be raising
residents.
taxes to pay that.
Right, it's a freebie.
Yes,
Right.
yes, sir. So hopefully that is, and as she said, I think we've gone down this process maybe about 4 years. So we have been through council very mindful of now setting aside funds for hurricane or storm cleanup, because it now appears that it's going to be a annual event for us. So that's what we have going on with Dorian. The second conversation that I would like to have, and it's more just giving an update. Today we heard a lot about, with regards to the short-term rental, with regards to the enforcement. We currently have 2 code enforcement officers, but those guys are pretty busy because they're not only responsible for the short-term rental enforcement, but also for anything else related to our municipal codes. So one of the things that has been highly debated, and council agree, is that we need to look at enhancing and improving our code enforcement efforts. So I will be coming back to the Ways and Means Committee at the November 26th meeting with the plan. That plan is going to, or proposal, that's going to look like we'll have 2 options. One is an option if we wanted to increase our full-time staff, and if we wanted to go in and hire more code enforcement officers, what that will look like, how many we think it would take. The other option would be that we will look at proposing to contract this service out. We currently contract code enforcement, well, it's Beach Patrol, Island Beach Patrol. They work the beach, public safety, but an extension of the town, they also currently do our enforcement of our codes related to the beach, as well as the safety matter related to the beach. What the proposal will come back is that we will have a second option is to expand, per se, it would be a separate contract, but expand their contract and allow them to do our evening enforcement. Both options, we're looking at hiring for evening enforcement. So this could be a 4 to 1 a.m., 5 to 1 a.m., so that we have a presence on the island after hours. We close at 5 o'clock. Our 2 current enforcement officers leave at 5 o'clock. We currently work with Kika. If anything occurs after hours, if a homeowner calls the gate, the security person knows that they can call our deputy one of our deputies can go out right now, or Kika Security can handle it. If they note the address, they can let us know the next day. We can then address the property management company, either calling them, let them know what's going on, or what have you, but as long as we're able to document it. So right now, we have that relationship with Kika, but we will be looking at expanding and enhancing our services for nighttime enforcement. So we will be coming back at the November meeting with some costs to add to that. And I know Kika is also looking at doing some additional things with regards to their enforcement as well. But ultimately, the town, we have the ability to issue fines. We have the municipal court. We have a little bit more police power than Kika, so we probably, I think, in this proposal, will take the lead. But for sure, we will have assistance. We will continue to work with Kika through their gate security and also their nighttime security. So that will be coming to you all at the November Ways and Means, and then for a discussion and a decision on enhancing and improving on our code enforcement to include nighttime officers.
Okay. Anything else?
All right. One other thing I do want to point out, because it's really is important what is going on with regards to short-term rental. Stephanie in our communication is currently working on a web page for our current website that will focus on short-term rentals. We're going to enhance that, and I'm really excited. We're going to have specific buttons to say if I'm a renter, or if I want to get a license, or if I want to do a complaint. We're going to also have on there, if you want to click and see the number of short-term rentals on the island, you can click that. It will give you some contact information. It will give you the number of vehicles allowed, etc. So we are going to try to also make it easier for anyone that would like to apply for a license, that would like to log a complaint, or just want to know, if I'm a renter, what do I need to know? So we'll have our rules and regulations posted. We'll continue working with the property management companies to make sure they have that information. Someone did ask about having a rules and regulation sheet where their renter can sign off. Stephanie has created that, so we're going to have some templates that a owner can download, and they can send that link to their renter. So we're going to try to probably roll that out and show you all maybe at the November Ways and Means or somewhere, but that's going to also be included in this rollout that we're doing along with Geroda's team with our Citizen Serve and Business License Improvement. So we're doing a number of things that will be in place before the 1st, or on the 1st. Thank you.
Council member updates. I'll start down with Mary Ann.
Nothing.
I have one, if I may, Mr. Mayor. The annual report of the Arts Council is out. You'll be interested. Stephanie, are we online with this at this point? We're going to drop it soon? Okay, we're going to drop it soon. Pardon? Anyway, here's a hard copy of it if anyone wants to. Let me mention a couple of highlights. The Arts Council, the Arts and Cultural Events Council, when it started in 2005, not all that long ago, hosted 10 events, and we spent $25,000. This last year, the season we just ended, 36 events and a budget of $300,000. Very popular, lots of sold out, and we do it with the support of a lot of our partners. Kika is a good partner, the resort is a good partner, the Andel Inn is a good partner. Let me mention some others, because without their support, Kiawah Golf Resort, Seabrook Island, who sponsors us as well, Holy Spirit Catholic Church, the Church of Our Savior, the Community Association, I think I mentioned, Fox Music, and so on. All of those partner up, and we get some great performances. If you had a chance to go to any of the ones in the first quarter, we had 5 performances this last quarter. The Marantz organization was out, Jennifer and Brad Marantz, for the Let the Good Times Roll, and then the Charleston Jazz Orchestra did a whole Beatles concert. These things are great. Everybody loves them. It's fun. I want to thank Gary Rice and David Wall, who are the chairman and vice chairman, and all of their hardworking members. They do a great job. Thank you. And all the support they get from our staff. Thanks, Steph.
Chris?
Nothing.
Klaus? All right. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, citizens' comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. Citizens, we always have at the end a citizen's comment open to anything regardless of whether it was on the agenda.
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. First of all, thank you to everybody on council for hearing what people had to say, regardless of whether the comments agreed with or disagreed with your position on things. Secondly, in thinking just a little bit more about Bo's passing, if I count correctly, he's the third mayor of ours to pass away. And I have zero artistic capability, but maybe there's a way to put some kind, you know, you have all the pictures of all the mayors. Maybe there's some way to put some black ribbon or something to indicate those mayors who were not with us.
And I apologize, you mentioned doing, and it kind of in the flow went right past it, but that's a good idea, we'll do something.
We have black ribbons already on the two mayors' plaques in the lobby, and so we already do that.
Great, thank you.
Any other citizens' comments? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.